It is an historic day. For the first time in its television history, Zimbabwe is broadcasting a court case. State broadcaster ZBC is giving viewers insight to the court battle that will decide whether incumbent President Emmerson Mnangagwa's election victory is legitimate. Nelson Chamisa's MDC has sought some of South Africa's top legal minds to prepare for today's challenge. The opposition is asking the court to nullify an election that gave the party 44.3% of the vote and 50.8% to Mnangagwa. CGTN's Farai Makutwuya filed this report ahead of today's court proceedings.
Zimbabwe's highest court will hear oral arguments of a challenge to the July 30 election results. Emmerson Mnangagwa was declared winner, but the opposition MDC alliance claims the votes were manipulated. Now, the hearing will be the first ever court case televised live by the national broadcaster. If you can see behind me, men are hard at work laying fiber optic cable to allow for the live streaming of this case. Roads around this courtroom will be cordoned off as the nation braces for one of the most important cases in the country's history. Now, the opposition MDC alliance lodged its poll petition on August 10th, 7 days after results were declared. The ruling ZANU-PF and Zimbabwe Electoral Commission have since responded to the challenge, claiming the election was above board. The full bench, which is 9 justices of the court, now have the task of making a ruling on the dispute. The court has the power to uphold the result, overturn it, or nullify the election and call for a rerun. If it declares a winner, then that candidate will have to be sworn in within 48 hours of the ruling. The court has until Friday to pass its judgment. Farai Makutwuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Well, let's get you some analysis of this developing story in Zimbabwe. I'm joined from Johannesburg by Dewa Mavinga. He's an analyst on Zimbabwe affairs. Dewa, thank you so much for joining us. Let's start with what seems to be the changing face of politics in Africa. In your view, are we seeing a change in opposition tactics and opposition politics where traditionally strong political leaders are now being subjected to the courts?
Yes, indeed, we are witnessing a change in the African political terrain where political leaders are now being subjected to the rule of law and to the courts. We have seen this happen in Kenya, for example, and now Zimbabwe. In South Africa, we have also seen an increasing resort to the courts to be the final arbiter in terms of serious political disputes. So now today in Zimbabwe, we have this landmark case where Nelson Chamisa is challenging the announced victory of Emmerson Mnangagwa, a narrow win of 50.8%, and seeking to hear a final decision from the Constitutional Court with regards to that challenge.
But of course, as you said, this is a landmark case. But in the past, Zimbabwe's judiciary has been criticized for playing politics and often ruling in favor of the ruling party. Is there sufficient faith in the judiciary this time around?
There is great expectation amongst Zimbabweans and also anxiety and suspicion because recently, in the case involving a senior opposition MDC alliance official, Tendai, the president-elect Emmerson Mnangagwa did say that he had intervened to ensure that Tendai is released from custody. So there are serious questions about the level of independence and freedom that the Constitutional Court has over this matter. But perhaps there are those that are giving the Constitutional Court the benefit of the doubt to say this case today is a litmus test. It would really put the judiciary to test in Zimbabwe to see if truly this is a different judiciary from what Zimbabweans had become accustomed to in the past, which was a compromised and partisan judiciary that would do the bidding of the executive.
And so a litmus test for the judiciary, but one that some argue the country can ill afford. Is this court battle in the best interest of the Zimbabwean economy and its people?
Well, the 2018 elections in Zimbabwe were a key benchmark and have to be to press the reset button for Zimbabwe moving forward. So this court challenge is important in that it puts to rest, all the disputes with regards to the electoral outcome. So it helps to put finality because the decision of the Constitutional Court will be final, and it helps to ensure that the people of Zimbabwe can move on without any questions about legitimacy. Whoever comes into power following this court decision would importantly need the legitimacy that most likely the Constitutional Court will confer on them.
Well, thank you so much, Dewa Mavinga, for that analysis, joining us there live from Johannesburg. Well, let's now go live to Zimbabwe and get the very latest from the capital, Harare, where CGTN's Farai Makutwuya is standing by. Farai, it is an historic day for both Zimbabwean television and the justice system. Talk us through the highlights of this landmark case.
Well, indeed, it is a historic day. We are at the Constitutional Court, and I can tell you that at this point in time, the court has just adjourned, and this was following the opening of proceedings this morning. What happened this morning is that the justices of the Supreme Court gave an opportunity to all the respondents, as well as applicants in this case, who want to be heard, to state their case and reasons and justify why they want to be heard. And now they have adjourned to be able to determine who shall be heard. The MDC Alliance has made this application. It is the plaintiff. The respondents include the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, the ruling ZANU-PF, as well as all the other presidential candidates. Now, a number of them have said that they have nothing to weigh in on this case, and so will not be participating. They will just be observers. Two of the presidential candidates have said they want to be heard and have been making their case in terms of why they want to be heard. And now, as you said, the highlights of this case, it obviously is because the MDC Alliance alleges that the results that were announced by the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission giving Emmerson Mnangagwa a 50.8 majority were manipulated in favor of Mnangagwa. It says that its candidate, Nelson Chamisa, is the rightful winner of that election. Amongst its evidence, it claims that there were votes that were inflated in favor of Emmerson Mnangagwa. Votes for Chamisa were deflated. It says that there were some polling stations that were counted twice. It alleges that in some constituencies, attendance and voter turnout was inflated in order to give Emmerson Mnangagwa that 50.8% majority. Now, of course, the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission has responded. The ruling ZANU-PF has responded. They both claim that the MDC case has no merits, that the election was above board. But also, quite interestingly, the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission is pointing out that the MDC Alliance was out of time in terms of lodging its application. Remember, the MDC Alliance filed its application on the very last day, essentially at the last minute. But the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission saying that on technicality they were late because the papers were then served to the respondents beyond the 7-day time frame. So all these are the issues that we expect this court to determine as it takes its adjournment, and when they do come back, be able to tell us if indeed this case will proceed and start to hear the oral arguments for the case. Very quickly as well, another update, the procedure is that all the parties, all the respondents will be given 20 minutes of uninterrupted time to make their case, after which they'll then have an opportunity to respond to questions from the justices. So those are the rules that have been laid out, and we now follow the proceedings, Lindy.
And of course, the MDC, for them, no effort to being spared in this court challenge. We understand that some of their lawyers are coming from South Africa. Tell us more about that.
Indeed, the MDC Alliance says it's assembled an A-team, according to the leader, Nelson Chamisa. They've brought in some high-profile South African lawyers, including amongst them Jeremy Gauntlet, who used to represent former South African President, the late Nelson Mandela. There is Darlene Pofu, who is the chairperson of South Africa's opposition EFF party, amongst others. They've hit a bit of a snag in terms of getting that team to participate in this process because they are yet to be issued with their permits or licenses in order to be able to operate and practice here in Zimbabwe. So at this stage, they are in the courtroom. They've been allowed to be in the courtroom, but at this stage won't be allowed to participate in the proceedings. They had wanted these lawyers to argue and be part of the arguments in the case. We know as well that the MDC Alliance is making frantic efforts to try and get those permits out in time and those licenses so that their South African contingent of lawyers can participate. We know that they're trying to get an urgent High Court order to allow them to be able to do so.
And finally, Farai, when do we expect a ruling from the 9 justices that are hearing this case?
Well, according to the Constitution, the justices must give their ruling by Friday, the 24th of August. Now, that is 14 days after the day in which the day at which the opposition alliance filed its application, lodged its application. And under the Constitution, they have 14 days in which to make their determination. They are hearing these oral arguments today, and according to some legal experts I've spoken to, expect that certainly by today, latest tomorrow, they will have expedited with this process of hearing the oral arguments, and then they should be able to then make their ruling. It is, a case that is based largely on maths. The crux of this matter is proving that indeed the numbers don't add up as the MDC alleges, or that they do as the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission and ZANU-PF claims. So that is the crux of the matter, and by Friday we should have a ruling in terms of whether the election result will be upheld, whether it will be overturned, or if the election will be nullified and there will be a rerun. Those are the powers that this court has, Lindy.
And up until then, I imagine most Zimbabweans will be glued to their television sets watching these court proceedings up until Friday. Thank you so much, Farai Makutwuya, joining us there live from Harare.